right, so we're down through all the reports. Okay, now, move on to what's probably the most important thing in the world. There are people who fight for your Second Amendment rights every day. And they do it in a lot of different ways. But there are very few people nationwide who dedicate themselves the way this individual has dedicated themselves. And we're not talking about just on a few big issues. We're talking about a number of lawsuits that have been pivotal that he's been involved with. We're talking about at the international level, at the UN. This is someone of boundless energy. I don't know where he finds the time to breathe with all the things that he does. This is someone who meets on a regular basis with people at very high levels. We're talking senators, and prior to this administration, probably the president. I want you to please issue a warm welcome for someone who really doesn't have to come out here to visit us, but he takes out time out of his day to do, Mr. Alan Gottlieb.
Thank you. It's good to be back with you again for a lot of reasons. Mainly because we really have a good thing going between us, so you got to keep inviting me back year after year. If you remember, I guess it's like the 4th year now or so, 5. Well, you know, on one of my trips, I predicted to you that we were going to win in court against New Orleans when they confiscated guns after Hurricane Katrina, and we won. And another trip back here, I predicted to you that we're going to go to court again and win against San Francisco's gun ban and overturn it, and we did. And then, of course, I predicted here that we were going to win the Heller suit in D.C., and the D.C. gun ban was going to bite the dust, and we did. And I think I probably on one of the trips projected that we were going to win the suit against the ban of firearms in public housing in San Francisco, and we did that one too. So I'm not going to surprise you when I tell you that I'm going to predict that we're going to win the McDonald's suit versus Chicago Supreme Court. So if you don't keep inviting me back, we might stop winning. Thank you. We really have a good thing going, and so we need to keep it. We need to keep it up. I'd like to just give you a little local story. I live in the Seattle area, and in Seattle, of course, the mayor, Greg Nichols, is basically Mayor Bloomberg of New York's alter ego on the West Coast. And he's one of the officers and officials for the Mayor's Coalition Against Gun Rights. And in addition to that, he's chairman of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. Well, a funny thing happened. We have our election next week in Seattle for mayor, and he's not going to be on the ballot because he couldn't win his primary. In Seattle, the laws got changed in the state of Washington that the top 2 people, no matter what party, go on to the general election. And there were 3 people that ran, and Mayor Nichols got 25% of the vote and came in 3rd. Which wasn't really a surprise considering with his various anti-gun antics, he alienated every gun owner in Seattle, and while it may not have 50% of the people in Seattle owning firearms, it surely is a whole lot more than 25% that he got in the election. So Bloomberg lost his left coast alter ego, and the mayor is not going to be there. But on the way out, the mayor decided that he was going to kick us in the shin, so to speak, and by executive order, not passed by the city council, but by executive order, he banned guns on city property. So all the parks and swimming pool areas and any place the city owns, you can't have a firearm. Well, in Washington State, we have a preemption law like you have here in California, and ours is a little stronger, and cities and states can't do those kinds of cities and towns and counties in Washington State can't do those kind of things. So yesterday we filed suit against the mayor and the city for their ban, and we're going to win that one too. I noticed the room's kind of packed, a little bit more people this year than last year, which is a good sign. And this is what I'm seeing all across the country. The gun rights issue is really white hot. And to give you an idea how white hot it is, in the last 90 days, I've done well in excess of 200 TV and radio shows around the country. And that includes Fox News, even MSNBC and CNN, and it's just the issue is so hot. I've never seen it in all the years I've been doing this. I've never quite seen it like this. And gun owners are energized, active, and engaged, and because of that, we're going to win. We had at our gun rights policy conference in St. Louis last month over 700 attendees and a really dynamite agenda. You can just see how energized gun rights activists are from all across the country. And I wish you all could have been there because it was the kind of event that you don't really want to miss. And so to make sure you don't miss it, we're moving it next year to San Francisco. Our 2010 gun rights policy conference is going to be at the Hyatt Regency at SFO's airport. And I expect you all to be there because I need you to be there to do me a favor. And let me tell you why. A lot of gun owners around the country are upset with me for picking San Francisco because they don't want to come to California because it's not such a gun-friendly state. And they'd like to go someplace more like, where they can carry their gun openly like Phoenix, or bring their gun with them, with a concealed permit that they've got in their state that has reciprocity where we have our conference. So a lot of them are upset with me because they can't bring their gun with them, they don't want to come. Which means I might have a lot of empty chairs there. And this year we had no empty chairs, and I want to make sure we have no empty chairs next year too. So I need you all there, dragging your friends, your buddies, your family, everybody, okay? Promise? It's the last full weekend in September, and I'm sure Mark will make sure that you all know about it. But if I can, I'd like to get into some of the legal cases that are going on right now, because most of the action on the gun rights front right now is actually in the courts, which is a little unusual. All the years I've been doing this as well. It's usually in the legislatures, and we get very little lip service from the courts or cases we can bring to the courts. So let me go down some of the ones, the key ones that we're involved in right now. There's over a dozen of them that are active right now that we are engaged in, but I'm going to touch on some of the bigger ones. We sort of just had a victory on one in Washington, D.C., where after the Heller decision was passed, or was issued by the Supreme Court, the city had to change their gun law. And they changed the law, but did it in a way that wasn't going to hold up to scrutiny, and so they changed it again. And in changing it again, they looked at California, and they adopted the so-called handgun roster that you have here in California. And if you didn't have a handgun that was on that roster, you weren't able to legally own that gun in Washington, D.C. So we sued them. And of course, Alan Gore is now basically the attorney of record for the Second Amendment Foundation, or at least leads our litigation team. And he was the attorney to file the suit on that case. And we found some very interesting plaintiffs on that. And of course, what's really great is and you guys are probably familiar with it because it's your California handgun roster. But like as an example, on your handgun roster, a 9mm Springfield Armory handgun in stainless steel is on the list. In black, it's on the list, but the two-tone brown and beige model is not on the list. So in Washington, D.C., we accused them of judging people by the color of their gun, not the color of their gun. Needless to say, by the time it was ready to go to court, the city didn't know what to do, and so they changed the law. So they're now saying that any gun that's considered to be safe anywhere in the country by any state is acceptable in Washington, D.C. And since they don't know what those lists are, they're basically accepting any gun. So that's a pretty big victory there. So we decided to build on that, and we sued D.C. again. Before the Heller decision, Washington, D.C. had a law that said you could get a concealed carry permit. Of course, they didn't issue any, but the law was on the books, and to get it, you had to go to the police chief of Washington, D.C. and get permission to carry concealed. They wouldn't give anybody permission. After Heller, when they changed the law, they left that part on the books that you could still get a concealed carry permit, except they took away the issuing agent. So now there's nobody to go to. So in Washington, D.C., we filed suit because we're not saying they can't regulate, we're not saying that they can't issue a permit, but you can't ban both concealed carry and open carry and have no kind of carry whatsoever, because that's a ban. It's an outright ban. That doesn't stand up to the Heller test. So we're in court with them with that right now. And just to give you a little funny thing about that, they answered our complaint, and they said to the court, well, gee, we don't see anything wrong with our ban, because that ban is really in the mainstream of what all the states in the United States do. Well, to my knowledge, the only state that bans both open and concealed carry is Barack Obama's home state of Illinois. And Wisconsin, of course, bans all forms of concealed carry, but allows open carry. So we, of course, smacked DC back about they didn't know what they were talking about in our reply brief. But what was great was, what they did was that to prove their point, they cited a brochure from Handgun Control Incorporated from about 20 years ago with the data, which surely doesn't substitute for legal research. At any rate, when they replied back to our reply brief, they basically apologized to the court for being stupid. And I predict we're going to win that case too. We have another really fun one that we filed. That's actually our defendant in the case is Attorney General Eric Holder, only because he's the Attorney General. But, you know, in the United States, if you're a U.S. citizen living abroad, you can't come back to the United States, the state that you left from, and buy a handgun, because you have to be a resident of the state you live in. So basically, we have a plaintiff from Texas who works in the United Kingdom and lives there, and a plaintiff from Ohio who works in Canada. Both are U.S. citizens. They vote in Texas and Ohio, but when they come back home, they can't buy a handgun. So just because you're a non-resident, even though you're a citizen, you're denied your constitutional rights. Well, now after Heller, when we know we have those rights, we're suing on that as well. The important part about that is if we knock out that portion of the 1968 Gun Control Act, it means that any of us could buy a gun in any state. And of course, these days, there's nothing wrong with that because it's the same background check. The NICS check that's done in California is the same NICS check that's done in Utah or Wisconsin or New York. So the bottom line is they can't argue and say that, hey, you need this for public safety because we don't know the person's criminal background records. It's the same NICS check. So the other side has a hard time with an argument of a compelling reason why they should keep the law anyway for their arguments. But I believe we're going to win that one too, because U.S. citizens shouldn't lose their rights just because they're living abroad. Then, of course, Nordyke, which is very important, helped us file 2 new suits in California. And without Nordyke, we probably wouldn't have been able to go do it because we needed something saying that the Ninth Circuit, the Second Amendment applies to the states as well. So with the Cal Guns Foundation, as one of our co-plaintiffs, individual people here in California, we filed 2 suits here in California that basically right now are sort of, I believe, and Don Kimball could probably correct me if I'm wrong, are sort of going to be being stayed until basically McDonald is heard by the Supreme Court, and Nordyke is finally decided and/or one of the 2. But the 2 cases we have filed in California is one against the so-called California handgun roster. And what's, in that one we have some very creative plaintiffs as well. A good example is Glock model handgun is on the list, but the Glock model that's specifically altered for left-handed shooters is not on the list. And one of our plaintiffs is an individual who was born with a birth defect and has no right arm below the elbow. And again, we try to find sympathetic plaintiffs for our lawsuits as well. The other case we have here is on concealed carry. And we filed against 2 counties in Northern California, the big one, of course, being Sacramento. And that's already had an impact, because if you've been reading local newspapers, you've probably noticed that Sacramento now is issuing more permits than the current sheriff has ever issued before. But it's created such a big stink that he's not running for re-election. And the candidates who are running in his place are all trying to pander to gun owners, saying, well, I'll treat it more like a shall issue if I get elected, which still won't stop our suit anyway. But again, the bottom line is that we're arguing not that they can't issue a permit, but they have to issue it. They can't just not issue it. So we have those there too. Then, of course, the case that we just recently filed, which is one that's getting lots of national attention, is if it's made in Montana and stays in Montana, it's under the federal government business. I'll predict we lose this one. It's a very difficult case because of case law to win. The interstate commerce clauses and the things that give the federal government the rights to regulate stuff has been so open and so changed over the years that basically it's sort of like Fidel Castro when he got elected in Cuba and Batista got thrown out. The change that happened in Cuba. Well, that's about the change that happened the way the Supreme Court has interpreted the Commerce Clause. So we're not going to really win it, but what's happening is very interesting. We now have Montana passed the law, Tennessee passed the law, a majority of states now have it introduced. It's going to pass a lot more states, and it's going to create an upswell for people to start thinking about what's the federal government's role in regulating people's lives, property, and freedom. And as a result, I think it adds to the debate. We basically filed the case and basically we're totally funding it because it's an educational tool. Not that we're really going to win it, but it's forcing lots of people to do lots of things on the issue. And that's a good thing. So while we may not win it now, and the door probably would have been slammed shut basically by a case in California that dealt with marijuana. You had a case here that marijuana was grown in California, didn't leave the state. The federal government shouldn't be able to ban it or regulate it. And in that case, there's one slight nuance. The Supreme Court ruled that they couldn't tell if that marijuana crossed state lines or not because it looks just like marijuana grown anywhere else. But the guns in Montana are stamped, made in Montana, and have a Montana serial number. So you could tell, in fact, that the gun didn't leave the state, or if it did leave the state, you'd know about it. So that's one little nuance, but I still don't think it's good enough to make us win the case. On the other hand, though, it sure is a lot of fun. We've got a number of other cases around the country as well. There's one right now in Massachusetts on their safe storage law that's going to the Massachusetts State Supreme Court. That it's going to be an interesting case if we win it or not. It's based on a lot of things to do with Heller, that you can't have your gun locked up and inoperable. It doesn't do you any good if it is. And then we have another case also in Massachusetts where a former police woman, an African-American individual who had been on the police force for a number of years, due to political reasons, decided to leave and teach at the university level for criminal justice in Boston. And when she did, the police chief in Boston pulled her permit to carry. Well, in Massachusetts, people have to have a firearms owner's license, basically, to have your gun. She was exempted from that because she had this concealed carry permit. The problem is when they pulled the gun, they then came and confiscated her gun. And so we're in court on that one in Massachusetts as well. And there are a number of other ones. There's one that we're getting ready to file in Hawaii. A gentleman who's a citizen of Japan, but a resident of both Hawaii and California. In California, he's allowed to have a gun here in his home, but in Hawaii, he's not, because they won't let him register because he's not a citizen. Hawaii is the last state in the country with that law. Washington State had that law. We got a be a court action last year and forced the state to change the law. California had a law like that you got rid of it over a decade ago, I believe. Hawaii is the last state to have it. We're getting prepared to sue that one as well in Hawaii. That's just some of the cases that are going on right now, which gives you an idea of the cost of the amount of litigation, things that we're doing, and those don't account of amicus briefs in other cases as well. The issue is going to stay red hot. It's not going away, particularly because of McDonald versus Chicago. And that case is going to get a lot of attention, and let me predict here again, we're going to win that case. Don Kilmer mentioned that there are two theories, the theory of privileges and immunities and the theories of due process. And when we first filed this case, I didn't think too much about it. And then when the Supreme Court granted cert, I lost a lot of sleep for a few nights. And Alan Gore, of course, held my hand so I could get back to sleep again. Because what's going to happen here is, I believe now that the court's not going to pick due process or privileges or immunities. They're going to split all over the map. Some justices will say there is no 14th Amendment incorporation for the Second Amendment. Some will say it's due process. Some will say it's privileges and immunities. But it doesn't matter. As long as 5 of them say it counts, it counts. So it's probably going to be a very fractured decision for reasons why, but the reasons aren't going to matter. What's going to matter is we get 5 votes saying it's incorporated. And so we're going to win. And we're probably going to get a lot more than the 5 votes. But that was going down. Now, all this legal action is really, really very important, because when George Bush left the White House, the Democrats in control of the Senate refused to confirm an awful lot of nominees to the federal courts. There's a lot of vacancies sitting there that Barack Obama is filling. When those vacancies get filled, a lot of our opportunities in the courts may get slammed shut on us. Let me give you an example. A gentleman by the name of David Hamilton in the 7th Circuit, which oversees Chicago, is been nominated to the Court of Appeals one notch below the Supreme Court. This is a representative example of the kind of people that are being appointed or nominated to fulfill court seats. David Hamilton was also a Barack Obama-type community organizer and attorney for Acorn. Now, a lot of us don't realize it, because I've been in this cause forever and didn't really realize it. But one of the main things Acorn does in community organizing is work against gun rights. They work at city council meetings to get ordinances passed for zoning so you can't have gun stores open up. They picket gun shops. In Jersey City, New Jersey, they filed briefs in court saying that Jersey City had a right to limit you to 1 handgun a month, despite the fact the state had a preemption law. They've done a lot of work on their attorneys on amicus briefs under various groups' names that are quote-unquote affiliates of Acorn, so it doesn't necessarily have the Acorn name on it. So you get different things like the Freedom States Association and various other groups of names on various things. It's all exactly the same people that are in Acorn. They use multiple names. And so I never myself never realized just the fact that Acorn is probably one of the biggest anti-gun groups out there. Because a lot of things aren't necessarily done in their name, it's just their people. Again, all this litigation now is that important because we may not have the opportunity a couple of years down the road from now to have these same kinds of victories in the courts. Let me move us over to the legislative front. We've had a couple victories this year, so to speak. I call it a victory even though we didn't win when concealed carry reciprocity only got 58 votes in the U.S. Senate and we needed 60 to shut off the filibuster. But getting 58 senators to vote for that is like a lion's shift. And eventually we're going to get that 60 to get it through, or we're going to get control of the Senate and we won't need the 60, we'll only need 50. But that was a pretty big victory. And then the victory of getting guns, so to speak, allowed to be checked in baggage on Amtrak back on trains was another big victory in the Senate. However, a lot of the votes we get are only votes because somebody wants to say, I voted pro-gun, so you can't use it against me. And it's a throwaway vote. One of the things that really disturbs me is a bill that is up there by a very sneaky, crafty senator, Senator Lautenberg from New Jersey. That's 1317. Now, 1317 by itself isn't going to go anywhere, and that's why it doesn't have a lot of co-sponsors. But as you've been watching and seeing how our Congress works, it's very easy for somebody at the last minute to tack a bill on as an amendment to something else, and it flies right through. And if it's a non-germane amendment to an appropriations bill, like one on terrorism, it can fly very quickly. This bill would give the Attorney General, Eric Holder of the United States, not a friend of ours by any stretch of the imagination. I'll just remind you that when Heller was being argued before the Supreme Court, that Eric Holder, not as Attorney General, but as a private citizen, as an attorney, filed an amicus brief arguing that we didn't have any rights under the Second Amendment to own any kind of gun whatsoever. This bill would give Eric Holder the authority to ban gun ownership from anyone who's on the no-fly list. Now, there are right now over 1 million Americans on the no-fly list. We don't know how you get there. We don't even know how you get off the list. Basically, the Attorney General could actually probably put people on the list. It's a way of disenfranchising at least 1 million Americans with gun ownership rights. You know, 1 million Americans are not terrorists. And adding more to it. Now, if you remember Lautenberg, this is the same senator that passed the amendment that went on to the domestic violence bill that said that anybody who was convicted of a domestic violence misdemeanor couldn't own a gun, for the first time making a misdemeanor disqualification for gun ownership instead of a felony. And the way it's defined in the bill, it could just be, it could be something totally nonviolent. You trespassed on the property, you tried to pick up the kids on the wrong day, all kinds of things going on. It's a restraining order in a divorce going on, where the judge just puts a restraining order against both parties, period. In a lot of states, there's no show of violence or anything. Lautenberg's very sneaky about disenfranchising gun ownership. This is one bill that really bothers me because it could be used to disenfranchise lots of people and sneak in on us, despite the fact that in a lot of ways we have a pro-gun rights Congress right now. So that's one we have to worry about. And then, of course, on the regulatory front, I mean, people like, we now have a czar of regulation and information for the administration, Cass Sunstein, who, aside from the fact that he thinks that animals should have the right to sue people in court, doesn't believe that anybody should have a right to keep their arms either. And this is a guy who's going to be in charge of all the government agencies that regulate everything. And in the area of firearms, something that he hates tremendously, it can impact every gun store. It can impact every place of business. Can you have a gun, to take a gun to work with you? OSHA regulations, the Park Service, all kinds of hunting type, activities on federal lands. It goes on and on and on, and that's another area we have to worry about. And of course, one that I've been working on pretty heavily for the last several months right now is the United Nations and various international treaties. And this is another really big threat. One treaty that Bill Clinton had signed with the Organization of American States, which basically could impact firearms ownership in our country greatly. The U.S. Senate has never ever ratified. Barack Obama is now pushing, and he wants the Senate to ratify it. The part that affects us in it that's bad news is it treats every component of a firearm, or every component of ammunition, as if it were the firearm ammunition, and everything has to be able to be traceable to the end user, which would make ammunition, first of all, reloading out the window. And second of all, it would drive the cost of ammunition up to an unbelievable price to be able to mark every component of the ammunition so that you can trace it, the primer, the powder, the bullet, the casing. I mean, it gets to the point of lunacy. And this has had a very heavy impact on us. There's also treaties coming out of the European Union that are just totally obnoxious. Now, I think last year when I was here, I mentioned that I was on the executive committee of the World Forum for Future Sport Shooting Activities. I just came back from meetings in Europe, their semi-annual meeting. And a number of us that are there decided that the World Forum doesn't really fit the mold and the need of everything that we need. Mainly because it involves sport shooting only. And under sport shooting, it spends most of its time just on hunting. Nobody gives any lip service whatsoever internationally to something called self-defense. Now, in Europe, of course, self-defense is basically outlawed. But somebody wants to talk about it. And I've discovered the United Nations, the fact if you're right to hunt, or we're thinning out crowds, or thinning out species of animals that are going to overpopulate, or provides food for people in rural areas of the world, or the fact that tourism money comes in for economic benefits of hunting, doesn't quite sell when groups like IANS at the United Nations are trying to ban firearms because, quote unquote, they're used to kill people. So we've set up a new group, and Robert Glock from Glock Firearms is going to serve as the first president of it. And it's called the International Association for the Protection of Civilian Arms Rights, IAPCAR. And we've already got about groups in a dozen countries that have signed up to it. And by the time we're done by probably a SHOT Show this year in January, we're probably going to have 30 to 40 various organizations from various countries involved with it. And it's going to be a pushback where we talk about self-defense is a human right. And if the United Nations supports human rights, they have to support the right of self-defense. And you can't have a civil society where people can't defend themselves. And so we're going to push back greatly on that. We're in the process of raising several $1 million internationally to be able to do it. So you're going to hear about a new group, but it probably won't do a whole lot in the United States. Most of this work will be done outside our borders, because right now, gun rights know no borders. And our opponents basically work across country lines, to shift funds across country lines. People like George Soros, sitting in Europe, donates several tens of millions of dollars to anti-gun groups in the United States. It's more of an international type battle. I'd like to end, I guess, a little bit. I always get asked a question about the 2010 elections. And let me give you my take on it. The American people are very angry and upset right now. Gun owners are really on point. We're organized, we're active, our numbers are actually growing in the activist category. But when you really look at the election landscape, there isn't a whole lot that can really happen. First of all, the United States Senate, only 1/3 of the Senate is up for re-election. There aren't very many competitive seats in the U.S. Senate. In fact, it's only about 6. So if the Republicans were to have a landslide, they might pick up 4 seats. They're down 10. It doesn't do us a whole lot of good. In the House of Representatives, there's only about 60 seats of the 435 that are competitive. I think the Republicans are going to get a landslide victory. They're probably going to win above 20 seats. Let's say they win 22 seats, they still don't get control of the House. More importantly, a lot of those 22 Democrats that are going to lose are either A, pro-gun, or B, vote pro-gun because they don't want to lose. So from the gun point of view, we don't pick up a whole lot of seats. So the next election cycle, we're not going to better ourselves on the gun issue very much. And as far as getting, extremists out of Congress, we're not going to get rid of Nancy Pelosi. She's still going to probably be there. And that's what it's going to take at least a second election cycle for anything to happen. That's my take on the elections. That part is good news, and I hate to leave you with that. But that's the way I take a look at it. And with that, let me open up the questions and answers, because I don't know how much more time I've got. And usually our interchange between each other is usually pretty candid, and I think you enjoy it a lot, so let's just go for it. Yes, sir.
I've got a question about, we're talking about international rights and international treaties. Speak up. You're talking about international treaties, and of course the UN is considering the latest version of their small arms treaties right now. And Ellen Tauscher and Hillary Clinton are both anti-gun and have not actually said anything positive in terms of the Second Amendment in the last few weeks. What's the possibility of actually suing those people to live up to their oath of office and respect for this Constitution?
0. Okay, the reason being is courts don't let you sue people for decisions they make. You can sue to overturn decisions if they're not legal. Then the court's argument is if they're doing something that you think is, out of character for them, unconstitutional or acting, whatever it might be, you can defeat them at the election box, change the people in power. The courts aren't going to do that. They're going to stay in their own area of interpreting law. So it's 0. But you raised a couple points there. The UN has a couple of different things going on. The ATT, or Arms Trade Treaty, is one of them. That's one where obviously Hillary Clinton, this past week or two, is talking about how the U.S. government's changed their position. And they definitely have. Now, the truth of the matter is it may not matter. And it may not matter because the position of the United States now is it goes along with what the majority wants in the UN, which is bad. But they're still saying we have to have a consensus. The UN doesn't work by majority rule, it rules by consensus. Consensus means if 1 or 2 key players say no, it's no matter what. And in this case, and I hate to align us with the people we're aligning ourselves with because they're there for the other reasons that aren't good. But China wants to export as many machetes as it can to kill people in Africa. And they're not going to allow any kinds of arms trade treaties to go through because China wants to make machetes. And you've got, the Soviet Union wants to sell AK-47s to every left-wing insurgency group around the globe, and they're not going to go along with it either. So I'm not sure any of this is going to really happen at the UN no matter what. But now the U.S. can say we're lockstep with Europe and the European Union and all the people who care about the world, and now we hate guns and we should get rid of them. Another area that I'm really concerned about, though, with the UN is ammunition, which they've swept in both under the Arms Trade Treaty as well as some other legislation stuff going through the UN. And in fact, one of the things that stirs me greatly is that I can see the UN basically adopting an international policy and governments going along with it to destroy surpluses of government ammunition rather than selling into the civilian market. And as we all know now, ammunition production is kind of tight. Sales, a lot of calibers you can't get. Most of those tend to be the military type calibers. A lot of it that you can't buy is government surplus from various countries. If that gets shut off and that ammunition is now surplus and so destroyed rather than sold to the consumer market, that creates some problems for us. That is one area that I think we're going to lose on. I attended in Vienna earlier this year some UN, the UN has meetings both in New York and Vienna and in Geneva, and I attended some stuff in Vienna that had to do with guns in the area of crime and crime prevention. And I will say that the people that attended that, the criminologists from around the globe that were delegates to this conference at the UN, were significantly more intelligent and easier to deal with than most of the delegates that attend the stuff in New York. It seems like from the various countries when they send their delegates to the UN in New York, they're considered left-wing fanatics, or they're people that are in New York that go just because they get a junket and the government pays for it. They don't even show up on the floor and they're not there. These people were hard-working people in Vienna, and they basically, even though a lot of them come from countries where they don't allow civilian firearms ownership, understand the fact that guns do provide self-defense for many people, and totally took everything anti-gun out off the agenda and off the table. So in the crime prevention area at the UN, we actually won some victories this year. There is next week in New York, actually not New York, in Vienna again, there's going to be a whole bunch of stuff on transportation of firearms and ammunition across government, across state lines, so to speak, as well as restrictions on travel with firearms and airplanes, things like that internationally. And we have a representative who's going to be at that in Vienna next week because I can't be there because I have to be somewhere else. But there's an awful lot of the international scene that's going on that flies below the radar. All the way in the back. Nikki.
Hey, Alan, I just want to let everyone know, how many of you have ever attended the Second Amendment Foundation Gun Rights Policy Conference? Raise your hands. Excellent. Now, the 2009, my friend Dean and I, we videotaped the whole thing. We're downloading it onto YouTube. SAF GRPC 2009. Most of the videos are up, including Alan's, Don's. Don's real good. So if you guys want to see what the conference is like, and I hope to see every one of you involved in next year's. We're going to hit in San Francisco, and we're going to show Alan. We're going to make it the best conference ever.
Thank you, Nikki. By the way, Nikki, the quality of what you put up on YouTube is fantastic. The video and audio of it is just excellent. Thank you very much.
Hey, we're working on it, and we've got about 10 speakers to go, and then we'll contact you. And no restrictions. Spread it all over the place.
SAF GRPC?
SAF GRPC 2009.
And just sort of put that in the search box on YouTube.
Right.
So the links are at calguns.net.
Calguns.net has a link to it? Great. Yes, sir.
Why do you believe Montana's going to fail in their attempt to make their own guns without regulation?
The Supreme Court has ruled on it so many times and extended the Commerce Clause, giving the federal government authority to basically rule every part of our lives, that America is no longer the same country it was prior to those rulings happening, and it's never going back. The precedents are there. The court's not going to change it. The odds of winning that battle's been lost a long time ago, and the proof of it was the marijuana thing in California, which has reinforced it. So there's really no hope to hang our hat on. We have a lot of unique arguments that have never been argued before that we're going to raise, but at this point, none of them make me feel secure enough that there's any chance to get the court to reverse themselves over all the years of what they've done. It got done when Roosevelt packed the court, basically, is when it started. And when the court was packed under Roosevelt and the slaughterhouse cases, I guess, were dealt with, basically at that point in time, America became a different country. It's not going back.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
For those of us who live in counties and cities who, when the chief law enforcement officer refuses to issue a concealed carry permit, do you feel there's any hope for us in the future, or would you have any advice for people like us?
Yeah, the future is our case we've got filed against Sacramento, and is it Oro County? If I said it right. That's the future. We win that case, and it's going to change. What's going to happen, my feeling is going to be that it's going to force a change in the law, because the way the courts are going to come out with a ruling, The legislature's not going to allow it to stay that way, so they'll probably come out and change the California law to basically come out with something as close to a shall issue as possible, and that'll fix the problem in California about the best as we're going to get it fixed. Yes, sir.
Now, there's a new group called the Oath Keepers out.
Yeah.
Made up of policemen and ex-military people. My question is, how does this group stack up against the Second Amendment? And two, how should gun owners like ourselves, or like, how should gun owners?
They've been getting a lot of media attention lately. I don't know how viable they are. I believe they're totally with us on Second Amendment issues from things that I've read. I don't know any of them personally, and I haven't had a chance to work with any of them, so I really need to reserve my comment. But they surely are getting a lot of attention all of a sudden. I wish I could give you a better answer, but I just don't know enough about them myself. Yes, sir.
Some years ago, California passed a basic handgun safety act, said you had to take a test and then pay a fee and quote lifetime privilege to have a handgun. Sure, within a year or two after, they reneged on that contract that they made and changed it to one you had to renew every 5 years, pay more money, and retake the tests. Have you ever considered class action to deal with that?
Let's put it this way, we've got to win McDonald's first. And then somewhere down the line, that's one of the floors of the skyscraper we want to build. The McDonald case is interesting because when the Supreme Court had a choice, they could have taken McDonald versus Chicago, they could have taken NRA versus Chicago, and they could have taken a couple other cases that were around as well. When they took McDonald versus Chicago, I think one of the reasons why they did it was we didn't just go after the gun ban itself. Chicago had the provision that if you had a gun prior to being banned, you were allowed to keep the gun if you registered it and re-registered it every year and paid a fee on it. If you missed the window for re-registration, the gun became contraband, they knocked down your door and confiscated it. So the thing is that part of our suit talks about the re-registration. Okay, Chicago can make you register the gun and pay a fee, but what's the purpose and point of making you re-register the same gun every year and pay a fee every year? That's an infringement. So I think that one of the reasons why McDonald got picked, because it goes to a deeper question than just a ban. So while the Second Amendment issue with that, we're looking at 14th Amendment corporation, it's my hope we're also going to get some language that gives guidance to cities and states about how far you can go. And that's why some of I think the amicus brief Don Kimberl was looking at filing is important, because it talks about what kind of scrutiny level and the need for guidance to the states. So my hope is, like, we win McDonald, we get some guidance about re-registration, which then might be able to be used on a law that you just referenced. But when we won the Heller case, that wasn't the end, that was just the beginning. That's what's opening the doors to lots of litigation. By the way, in the area of opening doors to lots of litigation, there have been a lot of cases that have been already argued that have been lost, where the Second Amendment has not been applied to them. Usually mostly by, as Don Kimmer would say, criminal dirtbags who basically want to use the Second Amendment as their defense for doing something illegal. And that makes kind of a case law for us a lot of times. So one of the concerns we have is trying to move some of the litigation as quickly as possible before some of the really bad suits get filed that end up hurting us all. Yes, sir.
My question is this, okay, all of these law cases that have been decided in favor of secession. You get a situation like in New Orleans where the police go and confiscate people's firearms for no other reason than the fact that they just felt that, well, you shouldn't have those to defend yourselves. Or other cases of that nature where some people's republic, like California, or little mini people's republics like Alameda County, where I happen to live, go and do something like this. Okay, so you file a case against them, you get a decision, fine. You may even have to pay, they may even have to pay your legal fees. But as far as the liberals are concerned, that's just more tax money, and that's more where that came from. But I don't see penalties for people for violating civil rights like I do for other civil rights issues. For instance, traditional civil rights things in the last 20 years. And that, I think, is a part of the problem that we have, that there isn't repercussions for doing these types of things. Anyway, that's the question.
Yeah, well, the only way we're really going to win in that type of area is to actually get laws passed that have provisions in them for repercussions to hold people accountable. And if you don't control legislatures, you don't get those kind of things added into legislation. And, you know, here's the law, if it's violated, here's the penalty you've got to pay. That would make it easy for us. In California, that's going to be very difficult to ever get passed. So I don't disagree with what you're saying, where you're coming from, but winning that and getting it to happen is a whole other ballgame. Again, we've just opened up the case law on Second Amendment rights with Heller. We're building on it, and it's going to take a while to build it more, but there's lots of people out there, a lot of good attorneys who are visionaries that are working on concepts and cases to come up with it. It can help us get to those kind of places, so to speak. But it's really tough, you know. To give you an example of the repercussions, on the Heller case in Washington, D.C., Alan Gora basically devoted his life for 3 years with no compensation, basically, for that case. In winning it, he's now basically asked for legal fees, which he's entitled to. The case has now been decided for, what, almost 2 years or something? He hasn't gotten a penny yet. So, I mean, it's easier said than done, but we try to push. Don?
Yeah, part of the problem is, a lot of times these legislators will pass these stupid laws, and then they don't use county resources to defend the law. They have some pro bono law firm come in, who, by the way, gets the contract for doing all the county's little work, okay? This pro bono law firm comes in, it doesn't cost the county anything to defend the lawsuit. So not only are they not facing repercussions by having to pay law firms, they're actually almost, it's almost like a free ticket for experimental legislation to see if it'll work, to see if it'll fly.
Yeah, in fact, I mentioned earlier, we just did Seattle yesterday. One of the international firms, which is very big in San Francisco, there's a lot of work in the legal community against gun violence, is defending Seattle pro bono. We have to raise the money to pay for our suit. They're doing it pro bono. Yeah, it sticks in your throat. Yes?
Thank you, Ellen, so much for all you're doing and being here.
Yes, sir.
This kind of relates to what she said. One of my coworkers has mentioned to me several times that he's heard rumors that there may be an attempt by Congress to incorporate into the healthcare reform bills a federal tax on registered firearms. Have you heard anything to that effect?
Yeah, it's all over the internet. It's not true. I mean, but basically what they're saying is it may be done. No one has seen a healthcare bill yet in its final form. One could argue anything could be in it, including the kitchen sink. I doubt if that's going to be there. So, you know, and there's also the one floating around the internet on your next year's 1040 form for you're filing your taxes, that you're going to have to register all your guns on it and pay a fee for each one of your guns. That bill doesn't even exist.
I did see something on Snopes about that. They said there was a germ of truth, but it was older in it.
The germ of truth is the bill number existed a long time, you know, a number of years ago, but didn't even say what it said. So the germ of truth is that once upon a time there was a bill number with that number, but it's urban myth. But you know, I must get 3 emails or calls about that a day, and at this point I'm sick of wasting my time on it because there are things I need to waste my time on that are important. Yes, sir.
Yeah, in California, how can we deal with some of these laws that have been passed over the last couple of years that kind of skirt around the Second Amendment in a way that, like the microstamping or the recently passed, handgun ammunition registration ban from ordering and buying from outside of the state, where there's no clear self-defense issue, but what do you do?
Yes.
Yes, the Supreme Court, some of the justices said that they look to sources outside the United States for using their jurisprudence. And I think you talked about, was it Avatar? I was wondering if you could just see as that could be a positive
outside influence on our Supreme Court. Could you just give us a little more information on that?
Yeah, IAPCO right now is incorporated in the United States. It's being in the process of being incorporated in Belgium and in Austria as well. The model we're using for it is sort of going to be the model that Greenpeace and Amnesty International uses, where they're able to move things across borders, both money and people and personnel, and get away with it. And the concept behind the group is to be an association of associations, so that we're going to get groups in various countries that already exist supporting gun rights to join with it and work on the self-defense aspect internationally. And in countries where there are no groups right now, we're going to start groups, spend some money, and develop groups so they exist in some countries that need to exist in right this minute. Good one being Japan as an example. And as of this minute, there's 3 directors and incorporators to it: myself, my wife Julianne, and Mark Barnes, an attorney in Washington, D.C., who used to work for NRA, who currently represents the Firearms Ammunition Importers Roundtable. He's the managing director right now, and so it's running out of Washington, D.C. They're in the process of opening up an office in Brussels for the EU, and one in Vienna for our UN office is actually going to be in Vienna. And we have groups right now from Italy, Malta, the UK, South Africa, Canada, Philippines involved in it, and we're going to grow it because we need to have that international influence in a place where the international leaders can come meet together and work towards our common good in the area of firearms for self-defense, stops tyrannical governments, stops terrorism, protects you against street criminals, and despots and dictators, and that whole argument that we love, that we use here in America. It's time we exported it worldwide. Thank you.
In your opinion, in Europe, which seems to be the strongest gun representation, seems to me to be William Tell in Switzerland. And what
you mean Protel, right?
Protel. And in South America, what is your perception of gun?
It's interesting that in South America we don't have very many organized groups. We have a good group in Brazil that we worked with to stop an initiative on a ballot measure in Brazil a few years back. And the leader of that group now is a member of the Senate in Brazil. So gun owners exercise some muscles there. But we need more groups like that, in South America, where we're kind of weak there. We're okay in Puerto Rico, we're okay in Brazil, but that's about it. In Europe, we actually have good groups in a number of places. We have a great group in Italy. We've got a great group in Austria. A lot of people don't realize, but Italy's got a lot of guns per capita, and so does Austria. Good news is, I don't know if anybody here caught it in the news because it didn't make a lot of news, but Saudi Arabia just legalized handgun ownership.
What?
Saudi Arabia.
We don't need that.
Okay. No, well, they didn't say women couldn't, but at any rate, not only they legalized handgun ownership, but they're licensing people to go into the business to set up gun stores and sell guns. And they're encouraging, with royal money, the setting up of gun clubs. And the logic behind it is they have such a black market in guns in Saudi Arabia that the only way to stop the black market is to legalize it. Imagine that. And let me be honest with you, the reason why the Saudis did it, the main driving force behind getting them to do that was Glock firearms. No, they don't have a Second Amendment. No other country on the globe does. Sorry?
Why are we wasting our time and money on that when they don't have a Second Amendment? You're a Second Amendment lawyer.
Well, I don't am wasting time on it. To us, it's important to get gun ownership in the hands of as many people worldwide as possible. So anything that furthers the gun rights cause anywhere on the globe serves our interest, because the anti-gunners are coming at us from every country. And to the anti-gunners, the one area in the world that they hate the most because of gun freedom is the U.S. So it's important to start fighting it on their territory rather than fighting it here.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Speaking of South America gun groups, there's a strong one in Argentina. I Spanish is bad enough that I can't pronounce the name of the group, but their core membership is in the process of translating gun facts into Latin American Spanish at the moment.
If you would get me the name of the group and any contact information, I would love it. We have one group in Argentina we've tried to contact and couldn't get them, and it's probably the same group. I mean, dove hunting is very, very big in Argentina, as an example. But what we're trying to do is get groups that aren't just into hunting. Because most of them, like example, in France, there's a fantastic group in France, but all they care about is hunting. And they're really big, and they're very powerful, but they won't go past the hunting, period. So if you could do that, I really would appreciate that. And likewise, anybody else, any ideas you have of any international groups that exist in other countries, even if we may know about them, but we may not. The Philippines group we just discovered this past year, no one even knew they existed. So that would help me out a whole lot, thank you. You may ask a couple questions, I'll come back to you. Yes, sir.
Are there any good pro-gun groups in New Zealand? I have a relative who's somewhat involved in local government.
Yes, there's a great group in New Zealand, and not only that, but they just got granted NGO status, non-government org status at the United Nations, so they're their own NGO in the UN, and they're good. Yes?
What can we do to help you?
Do just what you're doing. It's all about grassroots. But the bottom line is that it's more important to build the grassroots. It's really important to work on the local level. One of the problems we have is that the national groups do a great job, but they're limited because we need boots on the ground. Let's be honest about it. Here's the boots. I love this. Okay, go ahead.
I hadn't heard it spoken of tonight yet, but is there anything, I don't know if it's a dead horse, anything in the plans or works for addressing California's assault weapons ban and getting rid of that?
Dead horse.
We've got to get McDonald maybe Chicago first. There are a number of assault weapon bans ready to be attacked, but that's going to come down a little bit down the pecking order. One example after McDonald, probably one of the first suits we're probably going to look at is New York City's anti-gun law. In New York City, to get a permit, you can't argue they can't give you a permit, but they can't take 9 months to give it to you. So there's some areas where we can go after that, and we're trying to take the low-hanging fruit first. The more wins we get, the better caseload we build, it's easier for the next case.
Exactly.
And so that's where we're going, and please just be patient with us. We have a laundry list as long as you can think, but it's just that we got getting there is another story. And I've been involved in this since 1972. There's been more action legally in victories in the last 3-4 years than the 30 years prior. It takes time to build it.
In regards to what you were saying, spokesperson for the San Francisco Pink Pistols, LGBT as in a gay gun club, I've noticed that the middle-aged gay men are often extremely hostile to firearm ownership. I've noticed among younger gay men, as in early to mid-20s, that's not there. So I am definitely seeing a shift, and you mentioned, I think, a shift too. So it is happening. I think that I am optimistic about gun ownership in the future for America.
Since you raised that, I talked earlier about how we try to pick, sympathetic plaintiffs. The suit we filed yesterday in Seattle, aside from the fact that the Second Amendment Foundation, the Citizens Committee Keep Our Arms, the Washington Arms Collectors, and the NRA are organizational plaintiffs. We have 5 individual plaintiffs. 2 of them are employees for the State Department of Corrections, who, when they're not on duty, can't carry their firearm issued to them by the state. They have to carry their own firearm, their own private concealed permit carry. And when they're in Seattle, walking through the parks, all the people that they have on parole and probation that would like to get even with them, that's why they carry a gun so they don't become a victim. And one of the correctional officers has been a victim in the past, that's why he now carries. They're 2 of our plaintiffs. 2 of our other plaintiffs are the co-founders of the Seattle Pride Parade for the gay rights community. Because being very active gay rights activists, they worried about being a victim of a hate crime, and that's why they have a permit to carry. And our 5th plaintiff, just for Seattle local color and flavor, I don't know how many of you have ever been to Seattle, but Pike's Place Market. One of the oldest vendors in the market who can carry the permit to carry carries a gun to protect himself and his employees. In order to get to the market, has to go through a park next to the market where there's now a banned gun sign, and he can't walk through the park to get to work with his permit. So those are our 5 plaintiffs, which gives Seattle good color from law enforcement to the gay rights community to Pike Marketplace businessman. We try to go out and find plaintiffs that are very sympathetic.
Yeah.
I don't want to quit and give you back the microphone. Any more questions? Yes, ma'am.
This might be a dumb question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. In the work that you do you ever have these groups who want to take away our gun rights talk about controlling criminals who have guns more than the people who are legal citizens, you know, us? Or is it just us they're after?
You know, we know that it's just us they're after, but it's funny that they very seldom really talk about disarming criminals. To them, it's disarming people. And a lot of their arguments are because if they don't disarm you, the criminal's going to get your gun. So they admit you can't disarm the criminal. They sort of know that. That's a given.
They never put any money into that?
No.
Well, they can't.
No. All the way in the back, sir.
Is there any effort into getting a castle doctrine enacted in California?
Castle doctrine.
Well, believe it or not, that might be easier than a lot of the other things that we're all attempting to try to do. But you need some changes in the legislature before that's going to happen.
Explain what that is? Actually, there is a castle doctrine in California with regard to your home. Okay? Penal Code Section 192.5, I think, it says that if you use deadly force to repel deadly force in your home, there's a presumption that you acted in self-defense. And then the government has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you weren't acting in self-defense.
Don, help me out. It's really not called the castle doctrine. What he means is, what's the other thing called? When it's outside.
The castle doctrine is typically the no retreat.
Right. But it's something else called, like when Florida and everybody else passed, it allows you to do it outside your home.
That's the no retreat. You don't have to no retreat.
There's a term, not castle doctrine, there's another term that's been applied to it. I went brain dead, I can't come up with it.
Stand your ground or something.
Stand your ground, yes. Stand your ground rather than castle doctrine. Thank you, that's it. Yes, sir.
There is a castle doctrine in California already.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Alan, for your efforts. Well done. What are the mechanics when you pick for a plaintiff to think pool, and if someone is chosen as a plaintiff for one of your lawsuits? Are there consequences? Is there a fee you got to pay, or what happens besides get your pick on the paper? Thank you.
Well, that's interesting. No, we don't charge. We usually, our individual plaintiffs don't pay anything, and we basically pay for the whole suit. Their name is there. Example in Chicago, McDonald v. Chicago. McDonald's a real person. He's an African-American male who's spent a lot of time in Chicago fighting drug gangs and criminals, you know, in his neighborhood, and as a result has been threatened a whole lot because he does that. And so he's a good plaintiff in Chicago. You know, Chicago is a city of color. He's a color. He's in a community, a high crime area of Chicago. And he's a crime fighter. You know, and all of our plaintiffs, we try to find people that fit in like that are sympathetic. So when you go before the judge, you go before people, it's hard to rule against the person. So we try to personalize it. I also think it's one of the reasons why the Supreme Court took our case and not the NRA's case is our plaintiffs were sympathetic plaintiffs. They tell a story.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Is there any viability attacking some of these laws, like in California now, we've got this coming up ban of internet sales for ammunition. Under the Commerce Clause, is there a restraint of trade issue here that we could go after some of these laws? Or one state I can purchase something that's perfectly legal?
I think it's possible. That's been referenced to us by a number of attorneys. I don't have a clear picture of it yet, but it's a possible point of attack. By the way, on internet sales, what's very interesting, a lot of your dealers and distributors in California buy their ammunition through the internet. Now they won't be able to. So I mean, there's a lot of repercussions where now they're realizing how poorly worded the thing is, and again, that's some of the changes that are going to be tracked that are going to come up and change this whole bill. Come on, we're on a roll. We're not stopping yet. Yes, sir.
You said a word that was key a little bit ago, and that's grassroots. I hope everywhere you go, you mention grassroots. I'm sure you do. With us, 962 here, we just see 962, the ammo registration. But the networking with other groups is vital, because Schwarzenegger, in this state with our water shortage, he has a water agenda. And he's trading votes to get 962, is why he did what he did.
You're right. That was part of the non-gun stuff that came into play with it.
Yeah.
You're 100% right. Mm-hmm. Okay, who next question? Yes, sir.
Just a comment, okay, this gentleman's question here. I grew up in Massachusetts, and I still have close ties to Massachusetts. I was there 2 weeks ago. You live in
Massachusetts and California, can't you pick better states?
Actually, in some ways, it's better to live in Massachusetts. You can own an AR-15 there.
That's true.
But you have to have a state firearms ID card, and you have to present that card to purchase ammunition and components for reloading. And I believe it was the Massachusetts Gun Owners Association took the state to court over that and said, if you need to have this card to purchase, why can you not do it on the internet? And they were able to get an exemption to that.
That's correct. In fact, our lawsuit on the safe storage bill that's at the state Supreme Court, Goal is plaintiff with us in Massachusetts. Yes, sir.
It looks like the firearms registry in Canada is about to die. And if it doesn't work there in a law-abiding country of 30 million people, why should it work in a law-abiding country of 300 million people? So how does that eventuality help you here?
Well, it doesn't work in Canada, but doesn't mean that we don't try to copy things that don't work, like healthcare and other stuff too. I mean, some of these people just don't care. I don't really know. We work with actually 2 major national groups in Canada. One based in Eastern Canada that's national, one based in Western Canada that's also national in Canada. And there's 2 new groups that just sprung up that are doing some really good stuff. This registry in Canada has had like cat with 9 lives. It's died so many times, but it's still there. This time, everybody swears it's going away. It's definitely going to bite the dust for long guns, but and I hope it does. I mean, the politicians just don't care. People that are anti-gun, anti-freedom, and want to control your life don't care about reality. They don't care if it works or it doesn't work. Most of them admit it. Interesting story with this, though. The UN in June, in New York, when they were talking with their gun control stuff the last time, actually had the votes and the consensus, basically, to push through their whole program. And all of a sudden, they froze. And this was interesting. And they froze because what happens if we do this and it doesn't work? We're going to look stupid. So they stopped and they didn't put it through. And the last vote that would have actually put it through, and they had it, the anti-gunners stopped because it was like, we go this next step and we're all going to look like fools. And they stopped. And so they decided to come back next year trying to figure a way that would really implement it that would make it work. And of course, it can't work because countries don't work with, if China wants to make ammunition, they're going to sell it no matter what. If Russia wants to sell AK-47s, they're going to do it no matter what. And they realized all these international things they're going to put in place, nobody was going to, even though they're all going to raise their hands and vote for it, it wasn't going to work. At the last minute, they backed away because they wouldn't look stupid. And we just sat there and smiled, and they shot themselves in the foot. It was great. Thank you very much. You're a great audience.
As always, we have to find a way of saying thank you. Now, last year, last year, we let you know that we were more than just a bunch of gun-toting, shooting, animal-killing gun people.
Although we did that.
Although we do that. That we are now more erudite, more educated, more sophisticated, more suave. And we have now gone back into the wine business. So, we have for you tonight a bottle of Shotgun Chardonnay. GS2AC cellars, one of 12 bottles in the entire world. And we would like to present you with this bottle of Shotgun Chardonnay in the hope that at some point and someday you might enjoy a bit of California in Seattle.
The proof of this is that California gun owners wine more than gun owners in any other state. The bottle and presentation case that you gave me last year sits on at top of my bookcase in my office because I don't want to drink it because it's so cool, it looks so neat, I want to keep it. So I'll put this one right next to it. Thank you very much, all of you. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Alan Gottlieb. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you understand just how unique it is for an organization to have Mr. Gottlieb come out to them with all the things that he has to do. Several hundred media events, all the lawsuits, all the activities. I hope you understand just how precious it is where he's able to spend time with us, and I hope you appreciate it.